Our film begins in Hawaii, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Despite the island's remote location, it has not escaped the epidemic of the 21st century: plastic pollution. Plastic waste is littering beaches and endangering various animal species, no matter how remote or out of reach these places may seem. In a laboratory located in the northern part of the archipelago, scientists study marine animals, not plastic, at least in theory. I have no idea what that is, but it's definitely plastic, says a researcher. Jessica Perelman is a biologist who has become accustomed to finding plastic inside fish stomachs. She has even started a very unique collection. Occasionally, we find plastic bags. This one, for example, was all coiled up in the stomach when I found it. I had no idea what it was until I unfolded it. How did you react when you found this inside the stomach? She is asked. I was shocked. I started documenting it, measuring it, taking photos, and showing everyone around the lab. We were all just shocked to think that these fish are actually ingesting plastic. To her disbelief, Jessica found plastic inside a particularly unexpected specimen: the lancet fish. When she began her research on this species, she never expected such a surprising discovery. These fish live at depths of about 200 to 400 meters, yet they are clearly coming into contact with plastic debris. It appears that plastic pollution is truly a deeper problem than we might have imagined. Even at these incredible depths, lancet fish manage to swallow small plastic objects. Sometimes, she explained, you might even find brand names, like this label from a bottled water brand. What is this? Someone asks. This is a label from a water bottle, a Dasani bottle, clearly found among the contents of the lancet fish's stomach. Is Dasani a famous brand? Yes, Dasani is a pretty well-known bottled water company. Finding recognizable labels inside fish stomachs makes it easier to trace the origins of the pollution. But there's always more beneath the surface. Dasani is much more than just water in a bottle. In fact, Dasani is one of the world's best-selling bottled water brands. And if you're not familiar with Dasani, you'll certainly know the name of the company behind it, the Coca-Cola Company. Everyone knows Coca-Cola, but not everyone knows that the group owns dozens of other brands: Dasani, Sprite, Minute Maid, Powerade, and of course Fanta, one of its flagship products. Each year, the Coca-Cola Company sells over 120 billion bottles across the globe. That's nearly 4,000 bottles every single second. This mass production contributes massively to global plastic pollution. In January 2018, the multinational made a bold announcement. By 2030, they promised, the brand would achieve a world without waste. James Quincey, Coca-Cola's CEO, leads the movement. What we need to create is a circular economy. We need to create value, and that's absolutely doable. A world without waste, thanks to unlimited plastic recycling. But how reliable are these promises? Can recycling alone truly solve the global plastic crisis? Faced with rising plastic pollution, we decided to investigate Coca-Cola's pledges and uncovered a secret strategy that directly contradicts their public commitments. For decades, the multinational has been fully aware of the damage their plastic bottles cause, but responsibility has never seemed to fall on them. Why? Because ultimately, accepting responsibility would mean higher costs. In Africa, far from Coca-Cola's American headquarters, we expose the truth behind the so-called recycling economy that the company claims to promote. Join us one last drink for the road. Welcome to the wonderful world of Coca-Cola's plastic promises. Coca-Cola and plastic have a long-standing relationship, and one full of surprises. To learn more, we traveled to the United States to meet someone very familiar with the subject. He lives in a small house in Virginia. Hi guys, hello, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. Welcome to Virginia. It's a bit hard to find, I know. I hope the drive was good. Come on in, come on in. Hey. Bart Elmore is a historian and the author of a best-selling book about Coca-Cola. His work traces the multinational's entire environmental strategy, especially from the 1960s onward. When plastic began revolutionizing consumer society, we began to see massive amounts of litter piling up around the country, he says. Coca-Cola tried to respond. Wow, we're getting blamed for all this aluminum waste and ultimately plastic waste. What do we do? One of their solutions was to partner with an organization called Keep America Beautiful. When you hear Keep America Beautiful, you think, wow, this sounds like a group started by bearded environmentalists. Or at least that's what I thought, Bart says. You see their signs everywhere in the United States. It's still a very present organization. But surprisingly, Keep America Beautiful was actually founded by the beverage, brewing, canning, and packaging industries. The idea? Let's tell consumers they're the bad ones. They're the litter bugs. They're the problem. Industry shouldn't be blamed for all this waste. And so, a campaign was launched. An actor dressed as a Native American character from an old Western appears. He becomes the face of the movement. The Crying Indian advertisement becomes a huge success. The ad shows a man with a deep respect for the natural beauty that once existed in America. As someone throws trash from a car window, the camera slowly zooms in on a single tear falling from the Native American's face. Then, a narrator's voice cuts in. People start pollution. People can stop it. The message was clear. Consumers, not industries, were responsible for pollution. Since the success of this ad in the 1970s, Keep America Beautiful has expanded worldwide, cloning the same model, always backed by companies with red and white logos. To understand how Coca-Cola continues to recycle this old tactic of consumer guilt, we head to Versailles, not the chateau, but the town hall. An important conference is being held, with elected officials from all across Europe gathering to discuss the cleanliness of their towns. The discussion is serious, even down to debating the color of their trash cans. To conclude the meeting, the guest of honor gives a speech. This time, it's the director of Keep Scotland Beautiful, an association partly funded by Coca-Cola. His name, Derek Robertson. It quickly becomes clear that Derek is a fan of soda. And if you listen closely, some of his slip-ups are extremely telling. I have the great privilege of working for an organization in Scotland, and also being part of a European one that gives well, I was going to say, doesn't care. But we do care. We want to change individual behavior. We want people to think about civic pride and the personal responsibilities they should take. He emphasizes individual, not collective, responsibility. Clearly, not much has changed since the Crying Indian advertisement. I saw you drinking a Coca-Cola this morning, someone remarks. Is single-use plastic a problem today? Derek answers. Plastic and plastic packaging have a very useful function in society. We need to remember that the products are very creative, very useful, and perform important functions. The key is how we, as individuals, dispose of them. He continues, Coca-Cola, for example, wants their packaging back. They want to recycle it, reuse it. What we don't want is for it to end up in the environment. According to the head of an association that claims to fight pollution, Coca-Cola is supposedly an example to follow. But when we ask him if his association is funded by Coca-Cola, things get awkward. Who is financing your charity? We ask. Nobody finances the charity. He replies quickly, what are you trying to do here? We're asking a legitimate journalistic question. He adds, my organization in Scotland is my day job. I'm fully committed to that role. I volunteer my time for the European part. By asking about financing, we had clearly touched on a sensitive topic, conflict of interest. You spoke of conflict of interest. We press. Do you think there is one? No, I didn't. I think you're trying to create the idea of a conflict of interest where there isn't one. Who are your sponsors? We don't have sponsors. He insists. It's a different model. I'm not going to start explaining how charities work. Is it that secret? No, you can look at our financial accounts if you want. But you said you work with companies? Yes. We work in partnership with the Scottish government, Scottish municipalities, and some companies. Which companies? How long do you want the list to be? He replies. Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Ryanair, Starbucks, lots of big brand names. Since the 1960s, Coca-Cola has been paving the way for other multinationals and shaping public perception. But what if Coca-Cola had truly decided to change? A few months ago, upon launching its World Without Waste program, Coca-Cola announced a set of very ambitious measures to tackle the problem of plastic pollution. For Coca-Cola, the solution is recycling. The concept is simple. Collect used bottles and make new ones out of them. Coca-Cola promises to use 50% recycled plastic in all of its bottles by 2030, and that's on a global scale. It's absolutely doable, says CEO James Quincy. There's already a model in China and other parts of the world on how to create value from plastic and get it reused. Of course, that would be great news. But after everything we've learned about the company's strategies, we wanted to check how often they actually keep their promises. The American company has been pledging to use recycled plastic for years. Take, for example, their 2008 Sustainable Development Report. Coca-Cola announced it wanted 25% recycled plastic in all of its bottles by 2015. For a long time, we searched for any trace of whether that target had been met in their 2015 report. The company never clearly states if they achieved their promise. Eventually, we found a single figure, 12.4%. At first glance, it would seem that 12.4% is the percentage of recycled plastic used by Coca-Cola. But upon closer inspection, it turns out that 12.4% represents the total percentage of recycled and renewable materials combined. And there's a huge difference between recycled plastic and renewable plastic. To decode the soda giant's jargon, we arranged a meeting with an NGO that has been following Coca-Cola for a long time. Hélène Bourges is an expert in ocean pollution, and she explained how the multinational twists words and statistics. Renewable plastic, she explains, essentially means plastic made from plant-based materials. But it's still plastic, and it's still harmful for the environment. Now that the wording is clear, let's move on to the statistics. From the NGO's point of view, Coca-Cola's recycling targets are primarily a marketing ploy to ensure consumers keep buying their plastic bottles guilt-free. Music, but subtle statistical distortions are not the worst part. We uncovered something even more serious. Inside an envelope were dozens of confidential letters and internal records from Coca-Cola, documents that had been anonymously leaked online a few months earlier. After carefully sifting through the information, we realized nothing could be further from the brand's polished World Without Waste slogan. Among the documents, one caught our attention. It is dated 2016 and signed by Coca-Cola's lobbying manager in Brussels. The document lists European measures that could be adopted, but that would not align with Coca-Cola's interests. Among them, carbon pricing, restrictions on the use of caffeine, and a ban on advertising to children under 12. In other words, anything that could hurt the company's turnover. On the right side of the document, there's a circle entitled Fight Back. It lists all the European measures that Coca-Cola has decided to oppose through lobbying. Among these measures, Coca-Cola outright refuses increased collection and recycling targets. You heard that right. While publicly pledging to recycle more, Coca-Cola is privately fighting against stricter recycling laws in Europe. In the Fight Back category, we also discovered another priority. The company wants to fight against deposit systems. Deposit systems are one of the most effective ways to combat pollution, and the oldest players in the industry know it. How does a deposit system work? When you buy a drink, you pay, let's say, €1 for the product, plus a €0.20 deposit per bottle. If you return the bottle, you get your deposit back. Suddenly, no one wants to throw bottles away anymore. Ironically, this is exactly how Coca-Cola began. Back in the 1950s, a Coke wasn't served by a pinup girl. It came in a glass bottle with a deposit. Once emptied, the bottle would be sent back to the factory, washed, and reused. This system significantly reduced waste, and it worked very well, until Coca-Cola decided to abandon it. Why? To switch to plastic instead, completely disregarding the advice of one particular scientist. Would you like to know how Coca-Cola got rid of the returnable bottle system? The company has long tried to bury this story, but we tracked down the only man able to tell it. Today, he enjoys a discreet retirement in Michigan, United States. Hello. Nice to meet you. Thank you very much for welcoming us. Please come in. This gentleman's name is Sandrine Rigaud. He worked for the American Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, for many years. He is also the first engineer in the world to investigate the environmental impact of Coca-Cola bottles. Holding up an old bottle, he explains, "That's a fair imitation. Although they were smaller. The typical Coke bottle was about this big, green, translucent, and always glass. Always glass." Sandrine Rigaud is referring to the early 1970s, the time when Coca-Cola first began exploring the use of plastic bottles. At the time, the company reached out to him with a question. If you take into account all the environmental impacts on nature, what is the best system? The engineer worked for over a year, comparing the environmental impacts of returnable glass bottles, aluminum cans, plastic bottles. He cross-analyzed the data, made graphs, performed complex calculations, and finally came to a conclusion. A glance at the table shows that the returnable glass bottle, provided it makes 50 trips before being discarded, is the ecological container par excellence. Thanks to his report, Coca-Cola knew, as early as the 1970s, that returnable glass polluted significantly less than plastic. But the company would never publicly share this information. "We put this together, 4 of us," says Arsen. "But they didn't publish it." Why? Because they didn't want the public to see the whole picture. He continues, "They wanted to keep it quiet as to which way they were going to go." Soon after, Coca-Cola launched the new lightweight 2-liter plastic bottle. "I remember clearly," Arsen says, "going home one evening and telling my wife, Bridget, 'They're going plastic. I told you they would. And now it's happening.' It was just the first step. Plastic bottles were marketed as easygoers, lighter, cheaper, and easier to distribute than glass. An advert released in 1975 bragged, 'It's light, it's tough, it's easy-goer.' With that, Coca-Cola buried Sandrine Rigaud's report for good. The American company never looked back. Coca-Cola imposed plastic bottles everywhere. And they weren't alone. The entire market soon followed. From the 1980s onwards, plastic began devastating beaches across the world. The first environmentalists started to protest. Certain American states even considered mandatory deposit systems again. But they didn't realize the immense power that Coca-Cola had. Coca-Cola has been a major force fighting against legislation that would impose deposits on containers, put a price on packaging waste. There are newsletters documenting Coca-Cola's lobbying victories. "We defeated the deposit system in this state. We defeated it here." Why was Coca-Cola fighting so hard against deposit systems? Because ultimately, deposit systems would mean higher costs for the company. It was a smart market mechanism, forcing industries to internalize the costs of their pollution. Let's recap. In front of the cameras, Coca-Cola's CEO promises us a world without waste. "That's our objective," he says. But behind the scenes, the American company is doing everything in its power to avoid any alternatives to plastic, like returnable glass bottles. After months of negotiations with the multinational, we secured a meeting at Coca-Cola's headquarters in France for an interview. We are given a polite and warm welcome, but it's clear we still have not earned their full trust. The company's vice president, Michael Goltzman, traveled from the United States to answer our questions. He has worked at Coca-Cola for 21 years and is in charge of global policy and environmental sustainability. He also speaks fluent French, so the interview is conducted in French. We press him about the company's lobbying efforts, the fight-back strategy against increased recycling targets, the opposition to deposit systems. Before judging their actions further, we decide to take a little trip to an unforgettable destination, Tanzania. We travel to this East African country, renowned for its incredible landscapes, unspoiled beaches, and some of the best safaris in the world. However, what the tourism ads don't mention is that Tanzania is also the incredible land of Coca-Cola. Here, Coca-Cola's presence is everywhere. Red and white buses, red and white walls, children playing around red and white playground. The logo is so omnipresent, you eventually stop noticing it. The good news, in Tanzania, you can still find Coca-Cola served in reusable glass bottles. But this too will soon disappear. Coca-Cola is doing in Tanzania exactly what it did in the United States 50 years ago, replacing glass bottles with plastic. Behind these walls, inside one of Coca-Cola's 4 factories in Tanzania, we witness the transformation. Our guide is James Malaba, the manager of the factory's new production line, a line dedicated exclusively to plastic bottles. Today, they are producing bottles of Fanta, one of the many brands under the Coca-Cola umbrella. Everything inside the factory is automated. The equipment is brand new. The bottles are filled behind sealed glass windows. And this is the counter for Fanta Pineapple. How many bottles? We ask. 86,340 bottles. He replies, in just about 2 hours and a half. That's a lot of plastic. We do the math. That's approximately 10 bottles per second. And that's just on one production line, in one factory, in one country. 5 years ago, this factory only produced glass bottles. But on the day of our visit, the glass production line is almost completely idle. People want takeaway, James explained. They prefer plastic over glass. Glass needs to be returned. Plastic doesn't. In terms of aesthetics, plastic looks good. Aesthetic reasons aside, the real driver is financial. Using glass means managing returns, costly logistics. With plastic, they sell and forget. Our guide tries to downplay the environmental impact, arguing that recycling rates are improving. Now 80% of the plastic gets recycled, he claims. Our factory tour complete, we head out to see the real impact on the ground. Unforgettable, Tanzania. Here, we witness the true consequences of Coca-Cola's famed recycling business. Just looking at the waste collectors tells you everything. Recycling in Tanzania is primarily a poverty economy. Martha is 50 years old. She has 3 children whom she supports alone. Every day, she collects plastic bottles on the beach. Which bottles are best? We ask. These ones, she says, holding up a Coca-Cola bottle. By working 8 hours a day, Martha can gather around 20 kilos of bottles. The price, 250 Tanzanian shillings per kilo, barely €0.10. At best, she earns less than €2 per day. And that's on a good day. Why is the price so low? Because there's too much plastic. And too many collectors like Martha, all struggling to survive. To witness the harshest side of this savage recycling economy, we head to the largest dump in the region, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania's economic capital. Every time a truck unloads waste, a frenzy breaks out. Collectors, using only their bare hands, dig through the piles, desperately searching for recyclable plastic. At just 30 years old, Mu has already spent 2 years rifling through garbage. He knows well, in this line of work, only the strongest survive. It's time to clean the windshield and move on. Next, we meet the people who control Tanzania's recycled plastic market. We find them in the outskirts of Dar es Salaam, at the country's largest plastic recycling company. What we see is staggering. A mountain of empty plastic bottles, piled so high that workers must climb it with 70-kilo loads on their heads. At first, the sheer scale is almost mesmerizing. The endless coming and going of workers carrying massive bundles of waste. But speaking to the workers at the bottom of the pile reveals a brutal truth. Here, sorting happens manually. Colored bottles in plastic bags on one side, clear bottles into large sacks. After sorting, the bottles are shredded into small plastic pieces, ready to be exported for recycling. Until very recently, all this plastic was exported to China, the largest buyer of recycled plastic in the world. The site manager explains. Last year when I was working and asking collectors, they told me prices drop. A few months ago, China refused to buy anymore. We stopped exporting in September and only resumed in February. What did you do when you couldn't export to China? We asked. We kept buying and buying. And that's why you see that mountain. In 2017, China announced it would no longer be the world's trash bin. Starting January 2018, it stopped importing used plastic altogether. This decision collapsed the global recycled plastic market, a precarious industry, and one resting entirely on the backs of the most vulnerable. Back at Coca-Cola's headquarters, we confront Michael Goltzman again. Plastic bottles everywhere. Marketing slogans everywhere. With Coca-Cola, you can still taste the feeling in plastic bottles. But zero waste does not mean zero plastic. And the promise of a circular economy remains very far from reality. To conclude our investigation, one statistic is enough. During the length of this film, nearly 13 million plastic bottles were sold by the Coca-Cola Company worldwide.